Search for a New World came with success but struggles when Columbus sailed the ocean blue with his crew in 1492. Not only did European life change, but Native American lives did also. Hundreds of years after Columbus's discovery, the first English settlement was established in the Chesapeake, called Jamestown. From this miserable little town came the greatest nation in the world. Upon hearing of the new opportunities in the land that was dubbed America, everybody came over to secure a peace for themselves. People such as the Protestants came looking for religious freedom. Conquistadors searched for gold along the southern parts of the New World, while the English set up colonies in the north. Africans were forced by Europeans to come over and work as slaves in the colonies. The colonies play an important role in American history because it is from them that we broke away and declared ourselves a free nation. The oppression of the English led to minor battles, which led to the French and Indian War and eventually the American Revolution. Around the time of the Renaissance, when Europe was recovering from the plague and war, Christopher Columbus had finally managed to convince the King and Queen of Spain to fund his voyage to Asia. He was looking for a new westward route that no other European at the time had taken before. So Columbus and his crew set sail in 1492, but what they found would change the world forever. He left from Palos de la Frontera and 8 months later arrived in San Salvador, a beautiful island in the Caribbean. But Christopher believed till the day that he died that he landed in India and that the people he found there were Indians. The voyage took him 8 long months. Until that time, the natives had set up their own empires and systems of trade among themselves. Columbus and his men were not interested, though. They were on a mission to find riches in this unknown land. When they failed, however, Columbus took his anger out on the natives by destroying their villages, and in desperation for any sort of profit, he took the natives as slaves. This new discovery would open the door for many new explorers, including the conquistadors, who would come and claim the land and the people for themselves. The natives got the bad end of the deal as they became slaves to the Europeans and died by the thousands from disease that were brought over. The conquistadors would go on to expand their kingdom from the Caribbean to Mexico and down through Peru. Their main interest was in the cities of gold that they had heard rumors of. Conquistadors had the advantage with their horses and guns, as well as the diseases such as smallpox that rampaged through the Indian population, killing entire villages. Explorers like Hernan Cortez conquered the Aztecs, and Francisco Pizarro took over the Incan Empire. The Spanish would have to pay for all the destruction with the Columbian Exchange. This consequence of claiming the New World would eventually lead to the downfall of Spain. After many failed attempts at settling the New World as well as the mysterious disappearance of Roanoke, came the first English settlement in 1607 called Jamestown. This little town was a horrible place to live due to the fact that the English were more interested in finding gold than tending to their crops and living necessities. After the first year, nearly half the population of the colony had died from either starvation or disease. Jamestown was set up in the middle of Powhatan territory, which at first was not an issue But tensions grew when the colonists started taking the natives' food. From here, war broke out, with only a short reprieve as Pocahontas married the colonist John Rolfe. While this 9-year battle raged in the Chesapeake region, the Virginia Company finally found a marketable product for Jamestown to produce: tobacco. The production of tobacco would shape the way Virginians lived. As the need for tobacco grew, so did the need of a larger labor force. Indentured servants and eventually African slaves came by the thousands to the New World to work in the tobacco fields.
Made up of mostly male indentured servants working for minimum wage. Their houses were set up far apart along the river. The life expectancy for this area was 10 years less than it was in England, the main killers being typhoid, malaria, and dysentery. There were also very little women in the town, leaving a lot of the men unmarried, choosing to be drunks or criminals. Most people in the Chesapeake region did not live past 20.
In contrast, the people of New England lived closer together and had more families set up around farms. Because the families lived off the farms, there was not as many indentured servants in this area. The first colony in New England was set up by the Pilgrims at Plymouth Bay in 1620. Their original intention was to land under the jurisdiction of the Virginia Company, but they landed further north. To make up for their illegal occupation of the land, they created the Mayflower Compact, which became a central document for democracy. The Pilgrims had good relations with natives, trading and buying land from them. Being very religious people, the Pilgrims went as far as making praying towns for the natives to learning their religion. In 1629, upon receiving a joint stock enterprise, a group of Puritans with John Winthrop as their leader went north of the Plymouth colony and set up the Massachusetts Bay colony. They believed that they had a covenant to do God's obligations. This made for a very intolerable but stable society. The colonists that settled themselves in the Connecticut River Valley ran into some problems with the natives, eventually starting the Pequot War. This war started out due to the Pequot Indians' frustration pertaining to colonists moving onto their land. They tried to stop them, but the colonists defeated the Pequots. Eventually, Connecticut separated from Massachusetts and became its own colony. Also separating from Massachusetts was the colony of Rhode Island. Rhode Island was founded by Roger Williams in 1636, who had been banished from the Massachusetts colony for his advocacy of religious tolerance and the separation of the church and state. Down in the Caribbean, after settlers realized that it was not the right place to grow tobacco and all their servants kept dying, the use of African slaves increased greatly, since they were better suited to the climate. With this change came the introduction of the sugarcane. This quickly became a staple product that overtook entire islands in the Caribbean. These plantations focused solely on growing sugarcane, but their lack of livestock became a problem when it came to feeding the slaves. From here, plantation owners turned to the Carolinas, who started growing rice to feed the slaves in the Caribbean. In 1682, the Quaker colony in Pennsylvania was founded by William Penn. They called themselves the Society of Friends and believed in equality of men and women. The Quakers were not big on slavery and often condemned it, even though it was used in almost every other colony as a regular labor force. The other colonies created their own slave codes, making the slaves a piece of property to be used however the owner saw fit. These owners were harsh and governed with pain and fear. The slaves would try to keep their African traditions going and would often form communities among themselves. But as more generations were born in the New World, these traditions and communities would slowly start to fade and become Americanized. By the end of the 17th century, African slaves would outnumber English settlers 2-1. Some slaves would even be forced to fight in the French and Indian War. Starting out as a regional dispute that escalated into a worldwide conflict, The French and Indian War was fought mainly between the French settlers allied with Native Americans, English settlers, in both their parent countries. The first battle that started this 7 Years' War was led by George Washington at the Battle of Jumonville Glen in May 1754. The war ended with the signing of the Treaty of Paris on February 10, 1763. The French settled with having Canada and 2 small islands in the Caribbean, while the English took all of New France. Even though the English won the war and gained new land, it put them in major debt. In an attempt to get out of this debt, the Crown imposed new taxes on the British colonies. This did not go over well with the colonies, who started to resent the British redcoats and ultimately began to break away from the motherland. On July 4, 1776, the colonies declared their statement when the Declaration of Independence was signed and the American Revolution began.